Hey folks, this is The Constant Show where we talk about movies and occasionally TV. And this week we will be discussing the Squid Games. My main question of contention today is, are the Squid Games fair? We're expressly told the games exist to create a fairness that isn't present in the outside world. So are the Squid Games actually fair? In order to determine that, we first have to ask the question of what does fairness in a game actually mean? The most readily available definition that I could find is a game is fair if players have an equal chance of winning it. So, for example, the odds of a coin landing on either heads or tails are 50-50, right? So if I bet on a coin flip, then I have even chances of winning that game. If I'm playing poker, I have just as equal a chance as any other player to be dealt a winning hand. If I'm playing blackjack, the same thing. Every player should be relatively equal in getting to 21. However, there's this weird thing that happens with probability where it doesn't actually follow its own rules. There's a famous example of a statistics teacher teaching about probability, and he has everybody go home and flip a coin like 50 times. He could always suss out the fake ones because they wouldn't count on there being heads or tails 10 times in a row, which will happen if you flip a coin enough times. Because it's probabilistically possible, and everything that's probabilistically possible will eventually happen. So in a game like this, there's nothing you could really do if somebody gets tails 10 times in a row or gets dealt a royal flush 6 times in a row, as unlikely as that is to happen, or pocket aces 4 times in a row in Texas Hold'em. You have no options as a player to deal with that scenario. Even if you had a time machine and you could go back with perfect knowledge of what would happen, the only way for you to win that game would be not play. Because of this, I think that there's a better definition that we can use to talk about fairness in gaming. And that would be that each player has an equal chance of affecting the outcome of the game. So instead of flipping a coin, let's consider rock, paper, scissors, or paper, rock, scissors, or scissors, rock, paper, whichever kind of person you are. If we look at rock, paper, scissors, each player has the same options available to them. And regardless of what the other person picks, you still have a chance to get a winning hand. And if you had a time machine to go back with perfect knowledge of what the other person would pick, then you could always win. I call this type of fairness in gaming play equality. That is to say that each player is equally capable of affecting the outcome of the game, and players are equally rewarded for picking the same options. A great example of this is chess, which is considered to be a fair game. However, the white player has a distinct advantage that's persisted from the Romantic era of chess all the way to modern chess. Because if I were to play a Grandmaster 100 times, I'm likely not going to win one game. Because the options that he's selecting in that game are better. He's playing the game itself better. Just keep all that in mind going forward, and then we'll talk about each game individually. Please don't watch unless you've watched the entire Squid Game series. So the first game that we get to is the one where you have to you gotta flip the thing. I'm gonna have a clip right here so it doesn't look ridiculous when I do that.
So enigmatic and charismatic, gotta live static, gotta get at it, never pragmatic, cause we live tragic. I can't live average, to be alive's magic. Turn it up in the back cause I'm grabbing everything.
You have 2 pieces of paper. Your objective is to flip the other one by throwing it at it. And I would consider this one to be ultimately fair because the determining factor here is how good you are at the game. Because if we look at the guy who's just going around slapping everybody, it seems like he only loses that game once of his own volition. Which is good because it means that he's selecting better choices in that game. He's got better throwing technique. He's played the game better. So the next one, red light, green light. There's a giant robot, and the giant robot will sing a song. Turn around, you can go. And if it stops singing the song and you're still moving, you get vaporized. So I would say that this one is really fair because all the players have the same starting point. On top of that, the thing that's being tested here is patience. If you're just patient enough, even the old man is the first to make it across, which suggests that even your physical strength is not necessarily an advantage in this game, which we see because the 2 fastest people actually get taken out. This one gets a pass. We consider this the gold standard of fairness within Squid Game. So next up we have the honeycomb game, which is where you get a shape in a honeycomb and you have to use a bobby pin to like claw it out. I would consider this to be the first example of game unfairness in Squid Games. So when we look at play equality, that is, players get equally rewarded for doing the same stuff, we see that there's a huge problem here. So everybody guesses their shape with no information of what it is. I mean, characters do know what it is, but that's an unfairness that isn't inherent to the game. It's more so the way that they're running things. However, since they have to pick these shapes without knowing what it is, they're not equally rewarded for doing the same things. So if I'm a triangle player and I carve 3 lines, I'm already done. If I'm an umbrella player and I carve 3 lines, I'm either just getting started or I've already lost. You could say that like if you had perfect knowledge to go all the way back to the start to pick the triangle, maybe you could affect the outcome of the game, but I feel like the actual starting would be like when you're carving them. It's a weird one because it has that first layer of you have to make a random choice and then it has consequences, which I think is never a good thing in terms of game design. You want players to be informed about the things that they're doing because then you're making actual decisions instead of just rolling the dice. Because making somebody make a random decision is no different than doing the coin flip where you have the probability of just guessing wrong. Tug of War is equally unfair. It tries to present it as though it is a fair game because the main character squad employs a bunch of tricks that they can use on a stronger team to overcome them. Part of play equality is that it should be equal even if both sides are using optimal strategy. If the other stronger team had access to the same strategies that our main characters employ, they likely would have won. Especially considering our main characters employ 3 different tricks in order to win this game, and they still barely pull it out. Whereas the other team used no tricks and was still in a winning position for most of the game. Strength being the defining tested characteristic here makes the game inherently unfair because you can't play strength better in a way. Like you could use leverage and stuff, but then if somebody's like bigger and stronger and they also use leverage, then you're just done. So marbles is pretty fair, I'd say, considering that there are no rules and they're just like, yeah, just make them up yourself. One thing that I did like here, though, is whenever the game is being played and it reaches a certain point, one of the characters says that it's unfair that like they have to keep playing this game when he's already in a winning position and he's gonna just clean up. To which the arbiter of the game says that like he agrees and now they can switch it. So I think this would probably be an even better example than the red light, green light one, because not only is it something that anybody could do because you're picking the rules yourself, but if the rules turn out to be unfair themselves, then you can just switch them. There's a lot of creative freedom there. So I would say that the glass game is probably equal to the honeycomb game in terms of unfairness. So in both of them, we have that random element of I have to make a guess and hopefully I'm right without any information as to what I'm actually deciding. But then even beyond that, if once the game is started, there's always going to be somebody who is player number 1 who has to be the first person to go out. And they have to make a bunch of 50-50 guesses, which probabilistically has like almost no chance of happening. I know what you're thinking. The panels have room for 2 people, so you just force somebody to go on ahead of you. And the problem with that, if the optimal play here is to make somebody else go, then that's the imperative of both players. And then we're in a situation similar to the tug of war one, where it's always going to be the strong players who dominate this part of it. And we see that like 3 separate times, I think, through this game, where a stronger player just bullies somebody else into going in their place before inevitably getting dragged off and then wasting 2 people. It doesn't reward you for being good at it. Even when a player does figure out a method for determining which one is which seems to be the objective of this, make a 50-50 guess and jump in glass. Even at that point, they turn off the lights and they're like, no, you can't be that good at this game. They essentially do the casino thing where they're like, he's counting cards and blackjack, throw him out. So the last game is the Squid game. I'm going to be honest, I still don't entirely understand the rules of this game. I know you have to hop on 1 foot and then go to like first base. And then it didn't seem like they cared either, to be honest. It basically just descends into a death fight. While this is equal in terms of chance equality, because either person could hypothetically kill the other person, in terms of play equality, I think it's completely unfair. Because There are a lot of characters who, if they had gotten to the end and then had to death fight another character, they're pretty much just done. And even if you're like, well, the one chick would have stuck in a knife and then she just would have stabbed like a bigger, stronger guy, even in that case, you couldn't say that they were being equally rewarded for doing things in a situation, considering that you had to cheat and sort of subvert the rules in order to make things fair for yourself. Also, important to note that if we're looking at like people doing things optimally, at the highest level of fighting, it's always considered an equal. If you look at the betting odds on any fight, there's always a favorite. So overall, are the Squid Games fair? I would say mostly no. My reason for that is assuming that you're one of the rich guys who's betting at the start of this. If you knew in advance like what all of the games were, I don't think you would have an equal probability of picking certain people. Because if you do pick somebody who's like physically strong, then you already have an advantage on like 3 out of 6 games. On top of that, it's very unlikely that like somebody who's not strong is going to win that last fight. Which there's going to be a lot of strong people left because most of them survived Tug of War, most of them survived the glass game. Doubly so if we include the riots where you're allowed to just physically attack and kill other players. Even if player 67 or 240 or 1 makes it to the end, then they're likely just going to get beat to death by player 18 or 101 or 244, which isn't fair because the only way for them to win the game would have been to go back and not play it. But that's been the Squid Games. Those were my thoughts. I'm a YouTuber, so I was contractually obligated to make a Squid Games video.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Do you guys have any options for next video?
Yep, what she said.
No, I don't want to be in the video.